I think the most interesting feature that we're seeing evolving is the diaspora city, so the distributed city. And here we can talk specifically about what's happening with Hong Kong, but there are a few other ones too, where obviously, you know, the Chinese Communist Party is cracking down on Hong Kong, wanting to make it more part of mainland China. And obviously Hong Kong's had special economic and civil liberties for some time now. So the people there have become accustomed to a certain level of freedom. And they're quite reluctant to give up on, as you can see on all the protests going on there. But what's interesting is that some of those activist groups in Hong Kong are trying to create a distributed city. So taking the people of Hong Kong and distributing them across the world. So you've got a city, but a city defined by mindset and ideology, and perhaps even a social structure rather than defined by geography. So that's a very interesting way of putting it. I know that Britain has said that they're willing to take on some of those people. Places like Canada have also said they're also willing to take on some of Hong Kong. There's even been some people in South Africa that said they want to sort of create an outpost for Hong Kong. Yeah, so I think that sort of diaspora city is quite interesting over there. At the same time, I think that we are also going to see that sort of the new cities are going to look less like cities and feel more in touch with humanity once again. So we're seeing a lot of crossover, and that's a sort of a nearer term trend, and this is a larger, broader, global trend of sort of bringing nature into the city. So if you've been in London lately, not that any of us have been anywhere this year, but you know, like recently, I've done a lot of things in terms of like agriculture in any cities, from everything from sort of bee farms to growing food underground to all the rest of it. So sort of bringing that whole sustainability closer to the core, so it becomes less wasteful in total. So that people are closer to the things that people need, which is food and there's space and there's green things, so we don't feel like we're depressed in those sort of very planned cities that I was talking about earlier. So I think those are two interesting trends that we're definitely going to see take off quite a bit.
Part of what we want is we've looked at the smart city, we've broken it down into about 5 forms. And the first part that we're trying to sort out is the safe city concept, because what we've seen is that if we're not able to make the city safe, it doesn't matter what else that we're trying to do, because the people that you need to be in your city are going to be driven out, the investment is going to be out, and you're not going to have the revenue that will fulfill all the other ambitions that you have. So our first approach is that the city must be a city that is very safe. So in 20 years or even less, there must be, the city must have wall-to-wall camera network that assist us in terms of picking up criminal trends, that assist us to improve the response, whether it is a criminal activity that is taking place or an accident. The smart cameras now are able to pick up movement of people and so on, and you're able to then improve the response of your security providers, whether from police or from emergency services. So there is one part that we're looking at. The second part is around what we're speaking about, access to government. So in 20 years, really what we want to see is just 100% interaction with the municipality on these particular platforms. We don't believe that there will be a need for people to be walking in and so on. We looking at some of the waste intervention. The city's current landfills will be filled in the next 10 years. And from what we've seen throughout the world is that there's just going to be no space to put in waste. So some of what we're hoping to see in 20 years is a city that is able to smartly manage its waste, sort its waste at the source. So your vehicles must be able to speak to how your waste is kept and isolated at household level. So that is another dimension of a smart city that we want to see. And lastly, as I said, that the investment is largely going to be around how your ICT infrastructure is. So we've seen that in 20 years, driverless cars are going to be quite a big percentage of the vehicles on the road. So what it means is that your traffic lights must be geared towards a driverless vehicle. It means that your 3G network, and so on, everything that supports IoT devices, the numbers that we see and we're going to see in 20 years, you must have the right environment. So we're trying to create that enable environment now through these particular strategies and plans that we have. So we're looking at different segments of our smart city strategy, and we're trying to imagine how the world will look like in 20 years, and then what are the things that we need to start doing now, and they're underpinned by some of the initiatives that I'm speaking to.
The city's journey for the next 20 years is one primed on becoming more resilient. I don't necessarily think that it's helpful to think of absolute futures or certainties in the way that we plan for Cape Town's future. We know aspirationally that we want to create more economic opportunities. We want to have a more equitable society that addresses the historic legacies that Cape Town has been confronted with, but in a way that is working with our potential to be more economically competitive, to have greater access to natural resources such as water, and to have a more definite water future, as well as a more sustainable energy future, which I think is the concern of most South African, if not all South African cities at the moment. And that compact, which is being worked out now, obviously with players in the energy sector, is of vital interest to the sustainability of Cape Town in the future. And so I think that helpfully for what we want to achieve in the next 20 years is getting the balance of managing the shocks and stresses that we are encountering right, and always with that goal of unlocking economic and social value and creating a city that is more secure in its energy and water future, as well as one that is aspirational in how it uses and embraces technology, and I think learns the lessons of what it means to have effective urban governance.
So I think there are a couple of scenarios here. So now I have to lean on my futures methods to say that I don't know if it's a single vision that I can share. I think there's a chance that it's more or less the trajectory we're on today and just more of that. And if you think about 20 years ago, that's kind of where we are now. It's kind of been a bit more of the same, just more intensely in some places. And I think there is a possibility, particularly given where the economy is and the world is right now, that it's more of that, maybe a little bit more social distanced, maybe a little bit higher, but more or less the same. But I think there are other possibilities. I do think that there's some recognition, obviously, to the extent SMART refers to tech, there are some of these technologies that make things possible that weren't before. And there's a possibility of us perhaps having built forms that are more, if you want, accessible to it, they can scale a lot better, that can be afforded and maintained a lot better. And so we were, in a way, pre-COVID already beginning to see that, much more housing, some densification beginning to happen. So I think there's the possibility that we do what we've been doing, but a little bit better. So that's kind of marginal improvements on business as usual. But beyond that, you know, we kind of in the smart city world have these two visions, right? Dubai or Wakanda, you know. So and there I think I have three messages that I kind of haven't moved on, and in fact, it's three messages that the SU faculty role got me to crystallize in my own mind, because I'm asked this question so many times. I had to keep thinking, you know, what do I think will change the city into something much more transformed, something much more interesting? Because that's what I'd like to see. I'd like to see, and you know, maybe now I'm mixing my time machine with my magic wand here. I'd like to see cities. I'd love to go to different places and see different cities. I'd love to go to Joburg and see a city that I could never have imagined if I was sitting in America. I would love to go to Umtata and find, wow, you know, this is really interesting. I mean, this is something that wouldn't be in Gauteng because it's not Gauteng, it's Umtata, it's in Eastern Cape. I'd love to see that kind of specificity, that kind of flavor, that kind of diversity in places. And for me, there are three things. So these are the three messages that I kind of haven't really moved beyond, and I'm yet to convince myself that there's something else worth saying. The one is the imaginaries. I think we've got to have and find new images, new ideas, new narratives of what cities can be that allow that kind of variety. And in that regard, there's some work I'm doing with my a collaborator, Teresh Govender, on that, this idea of what, you know, how do we play with the metaphor of the city? How do we play with different representations? We've all seen the renderings, we've all seen the kind of watercolor, either watercolor paintings or the CAD renderings of the future city, Lagos, Joburg, you know, Kigali, whatever. We've got to get beyond that. And so there's something about our imagination that needs to be expanded to where we can imagine an Umtata that looks quite unique and fabulous, and a Joburg that does too. So the new imaginaries, I link that then to the idea of new processes. We're going to have to work differently to get to that kind of a vision. And for me, the big catch piece there is participation, and you raised it as well. How do you work with many more people in much more inclusive ways? And there's some of these ideas around human-centered design, different kinds of forms of, you know, much more radically participative approaches. I think we really need to explore that. And then the last one is new institutions. You know, how do we actually allow different things to happen? Because, and that's everything from whether it's the planning regulations to what I was talking about earlier, how officials understand their mandate, what the politics of the day allow, what capital is willing to invest in, what consumers like you and me believe is acceptable as a home or a house. You know, if we all want to buy the same thing, then the market produces the same thing. But if we are open, if I'm living in Umtata and I'm convinced that there's something special about being there and that there's something unique that we have to offer, then maybe my patterns of consumption, maybe my imagination, maybe what I'm willing to experiment with also needs to be informed by that. So those are the three ideas I'm kind of still stuck on in terms of what I think will get us to a future that looks different and much more exciting 20 years from now.
From a technology point of view, there's no doubt that we're all going to become more and more tech savvy. I think the last 20 weeks have taught us all, including my 89-year-old father, to become much more tech savvy and accessible. And as a result, tech and apps are going to be much more part of our lives, which means we're going to know what's happening in our street. We're going to know when the bus is arriving. We're going to know all sorts of things. How many parking bays are available in building. I think buildings might start sharing their parking bays instead of holding onto them for themselves. So tech is going to definitely change our lives, or the way that we engage with our city. How different will the physical fabric of our city look? I can only hope that what we will see is fewer cars, that we will see more public transport, good quality, accessible, affordable public transport, that with an ideal actually ultimately of having free public transport would be ideal, and that there is access to good green space. I think there's an opportunity for lots of kind of empty lots to be turned into green space, but green spaces that are not looked after, that are not safe, are not, you know, they aren't going to add much value to the quality of our lives. So I'm hoping we see more of that. I'm really hoping that in 20 years' time, I can sit here and have another conversation with you, and that our roads agencies have become mobility agencies, that we've changed the way that we look at accessibility. I think that would make a huge impact, that those that still drive cars will all be driving electric cars, and electricity not produced by fossil fuels, but by particularly for most of Africa out of access to solar solutions. I'd like to see all our buildings have rooftop gardens, have urban agriculture in them, that we have good natural ventilation corridors in our cities and our suburbs, that there's fewer roads, that all the roads that are dual lane are now become single lane. Get rid of as much of the kind of hard stand as possible. And yeah, am I answering your question? I think I am. So yes, I suppose I have more hope than a prediction. I think that I would hope that we could see decent quality housing for everyone, access to education, and again access to good education that's close by. I do, however, think that there is this opportunity for the rural areas to kind of reinvent themselves. So we talk about smart cities, but you know, I think there's a huge opportunity for little rural towns to reinvent themselves. And I think the lessons we've learned out of working from home, which I now prefer to call distributed work, in other words, not working at the office, is that working from a rural town means that if I'm only coming into the office once a week or twice a week, could I live further away? If I live further away, I would hope that I then have access to good public transport. So now, you know, an hour commute in the car, could that be a 20-minute commute by train? So could we invest in our train infrastructure and roll that out even further? And in Gauteng, of course, invest in the Gautrain rollout even better. But make sure that there's good community transport that links into that. So I have a hope for the future. I think probably the biggest challenge in Africa is that our biggest cities have so much that needs to get solved that we may need to spend more time looking at second-tier cities and third-tier cities. That's not to say that we ignore the big cities, but that there are maybe better opportunities to solve many of these questions in the second and third-tier cities.
So in 20 years' time, I think that we would have embraced probably a very new set of technologies. I know we talk about cloud being the future. I am on a cloud competitive kind of route of where I do believe we will have kind of the best of breed technologies coming into the future, as opposed to the monolithic type of ERP system that we have now that has done us well up until now. But I think that, you know, the natural kind of transition from that into now being mature enough to move into a breed of the best systems that are out there will be what we will see in 20 years' time. I also think that, you know, we'll start to see quite a change in terms of just having more data with the different types of programs that we will run, and that allowing us, therefore, to make more effective decisions as an organization that is more data-led as opposed to led by assumptions at this point in time or in certain spaces and areas of the organization.
Well, you know, of course, I have that beautiful vision of a very green city with a modern skyline and all that. But let me get to probably some more mundane issues. I would like to see Ugandan cities in 20 years more pedestrian and bicycle friendly. You know, being a pedestrian and being a bicyclist in Ugandan cities means taking risks. You do it at your own risk. So, you know, proper bicycle lanes and sidewalks and also a system of pavements and sidewalks that would allow pedestrian movements from point A to from point A to point B would be part of my vision. Then I believe what is also important, I've mentioned green cities, of course, but for this, we need cities with adequate and vibrant public spaces. We produced last year, together with colleagues from Makerere University, a study on public spaces in Ugandan cities, using 2 Ugandan cities as case studies. Incidentally, both of them are the new cities now. So what we have found is that at the current rate of loss of their public land, they will run out of their public space completely in 10 years. And this is, yes. And so protecting the public space, increasing public space, and making public space usable for a variety of activities, economic activities, cultural activities, interaction, is part of a vibrant and smart city. And it is also very important for local urban economies as we know them, because as you may know, the informal business is mostly conducted in public spaces. So again, keeping those public spaces friendly to informal businesses is a good contribution to local economies. And my last point, I would also like to see future cities more gender sensitive and women friendly. We had, unfortunately, a spate of murders of women about a couple of years ago in Uganda, in the central part of the city. And as you can imagine, it all happened in some deserted places, in dark corners, in places that proved to be insecure for women. So again, we need to think of the city planners together with urban communities. It's not only the task of city planners, of course. It is the task of the entire community, is to think about how to make cities safer and secure for women, reflecting, taking into account their mobility patterns, their movements, their needs, and reflecting it in road plans, in traffic plans, in the infrastructure. Also looking at the facilities that would reduce the burden of their care work, that would also help them to fulfill the traditional functions that the society assigns to them, for better or for worse. We understand that changing those perceptions is a generational process, and it will not happen overnight. It is a reality, but helping women to cope with that reality and to improve their opportunities through a more gender-sensitive urban planning and urban design is quite possible, and something that definitely should be done.
Whatever your son is going to be, we don't know that yet. That job has not been defined, and it doesn't have a job prescription yet. In fact, there's some statistics that says that 50% of job descriptions today did not exist 5 to 10 years ago. So it's a tough call. I would for sure focus on giving my child digital capabilities and digital skills. Although I don't think that, that in itself is the career, I think if you know how to use technology, technology will played the foundation of almost every sector that we're in. If you look at the agriculture sector, the amount of technology that's gaining momentum through drone and hydroponics and some of the newer technologies, I think there isn't a sector that we can remove technology from. It plays an overarching role, and it's important to give our children the necessary skills for them to adapt and to use and utilize technology in whatever it is that they're going to be doing. If you want to be a doctor, look at robotics and how robotics are changing the way that surgeries are performed, etc. How diagnoses are being made. So there's a tremendous role that technology will play going forward. I think from a city's point of view, I think we're going to start entering what is called the low-touch economy or the low-touch environment, where we won't be touching as many things. We'll see a lot of more technologies coming into play where doors will automatically open, facial recognition, which will allow you access to your offices, real low-touch environments, which will recognize you and who you are, identify you. These are some of the things that I think that we will see coming in. So the low-touch economy is definitely something that I think there needs to be a bigger focus on going forward. At least if we want to keep pace with global trends, that's certainly where it's going. And then, of course, any smart city and any future city, the foundation of a future city is still built on the technology and the communications networks. So if we haven't got adequate communications networks in the ground and if our telecommunications infrastructure is not adequate, we won't be moving. But I want to talk, to things like some of the IoT applications, like, automatic water readings and automated traffic systems and things like that. But one almost feels that that's like last year technology. There's with, I think, COVID-19, the single biggest thing that municipalities and local authorities can do for themselves is to get good, reliable, stable internet connectivity into their jurisdictions as fast as possible. The one thing that COVID-19 has done for all of us is given us the ability to work from home. There are several global companies that have said that their people will never return to the office. So they will keep working from home forever. So what does that mean for you and me? For you and me, it means that we can move to a smaller town where we can buy a better house, where we can have better quality of life. We can walk next to the stream in the afternoon, So it allows us this ability to go and live anywhere in our childhood neighborhoods or move back to smaller communities. And for the smaller communities and, for the municipalities, that means that they can rejuvenate their towns, that they can earn additional income, that, there'll be more rate and taxpayers coming to live back there. But there's this single thing that's going to define whether you can do that or not. And if you have to work from home, you are going to need a good, stable internet connection. And that's what's going to matter. So the advice that I would today give to municipalities and local authorities out there is to say, make yourself attractive, invite operators, make it easy, remove the red tape, make it easy for them to deploy infrastructure. Not at all cost. Obviously, we have to have standards in place, but adopt standards, make sure they deliver the connectivity at a particular standard, and then invite people. Make sure that everybody knows that you are one of the smaller towns or cities that are gearing up so that you can have an influx of people exiting the major metros. And I think it's important for the major metros as well. Dan, urbanization places tremendous pressure on the large metros as people come in to, look for work in the cities. If we can facilitate a work from home culture and people can start exiting the major metros, I think it's a win-win for everybody, for the work from home community, for people wishing to work from home, and of course for the municipalities in smaller jurisdictions.
I mean, I hope we would see a more lighter side of that. I hope in 20 years we would start to see cities sort of take action and really control their own smart and data driven agendas, and really use technology to democratically place citizens at the center, and go beyond just sort of information dissemination and to sort of actively collaborate and participate with citizens to collectively sort of delivering cities that are better for all to live in. And I mean, I think we've seen that in cities overseas, like Barcelona has been really great in sort of having a citizen-centric model to data and smartness, if you will, and sort of really driven active participatory citizenship. So that, I think, is a great example to follow. I do think we need to find our own way of doing things in South Africa. But I hope that we can start to see cities really get those institutional shifts and political will to start to build internal capacity to sort of use smart technologies for the right reasons, sort of ethical reasons and reasons that can benefit all of society in the country.
A vision of what can come. It's not a foresight. It's not a forecast. It's a foresight based on the trends that we have now, based on the weak signals. We can just project what we can have. What I can see in 20 years in African countries, I can see great opportunities in terms of artificial intelligence implementation. I can see autonomous driving cars. I can see drones. I can see vertical farming. I can see young people, a good percentage of startups in IT. I can see, some cities in Africa like New York, in terms of urbanization. I can see a lot of innovation labs. I can see a lot of potential because the Africa has a great wealth, which has the talents, the young people, and countries like Europe and America, they don't have this. They want to attract these people to them. Maybe America and Europe, they have the technology, but they don't have the talent. They don't have the motivation of young people. Africa has this. I think if we, in 20 years, if we go with the right track, with the right strategy, with the right, and then if we implement it very well, we can achieve we can be a great continent. Africa is a rich country, and we can be like America, we can be like even better. If we if we develop the right strategy and if we implement it right. I can see great cities, really smart cities, even like Dubai or better, if we have the right investment. I can see a lot of technology which is making our life very easy, and I can see a great quality of life in African people. We have the land, I can see agriculture, I can see innovation, autonomous driving, the best, I can see the best road network, I can see a lot of things, but again, if we have the right strategy and if we have the right ecosystem to implement it. This is my imagination.
Have we solved all our challenges? What are your hopes?
So I'll talk about hopes, and I'll talk about just the reality of our society and the likelihood of achieving our best hopes. So my hope is that in another 40 years, we have had a significant reduction in crime and violence. We have increased human well-being in our cities, and we've shifted from a very market-based, profit-driven way of looking at cities, their economies, their spaces, and created really, and I think COVID-19 is an opportunity to recalibrate and to rethink how we include. And so it is my hope that we have inclusive economies, we have undone spatial inequality, and we have more peaceful societies as a result of more inclusive economies, more inclusive spaces, and that everybody is in a position to be able to improve their lot. And so I think currently we say that, and there's evidence that backs it up, to say that cities are places of opportunity. I think more than any other place, cities are the best opportunity to improve your lot in life. And it's true. Average incomes are higher in the 8 or 9 larger metros than anywhere else in the country. And so how do we really leverage that so we include more people, we have more sustainable livelihoods, more sustainable incomes, and then you begin to have an impact on the state of violence and crime. And you have safer cities, you have a more peaceful society. So it's my hope that in another 40 years, we've had significant impact using the evidence that we've generated on the state of violence and crime. I think South Africa generally as a country is a country of great potential, but that potential is significantly challenged by the state of crime and violence. And if we can get that right, we can have greater success in every other aspect. Yeah. In terms of like, I equally have a cynical view. We equally, depending on the choices we make going forward, depending on whether we take on the lessons that have been presented by our current situation, we could equally regress and the situation become worse. And it's not something I want to see, but in being realistic, I would say that our choices today and now will significantly determine whether we land on the positive or on the negative side of that. Yeah, I don't want to be too cynical, but I think it's very important to, I think this is definitely a moment where we as a country and as a society get to decide who we are going to be.
20 years from now, there will be more automated vehicles, obviously. I don't expect trains to have human drivers. We are going to see scenarios where aeroplanes fly themselves more than ever. Drivers would just be there merely to give new instructions, such as, for example, you're flying to LA and you decide along the way that, hell no, maybe I must go through Montreal in Canada. Then you provide the new set of instructions to tell your, by then, unmanned aircraft to go via Montreal. And the landing in Montreal will be seamless, will be automated. And we can see some of these things coming through with 5G. Elon Musk satellite networks. In the future, I know they're talking lots of satellites, well over 40,000 satellites, but those microsatellites would be providing guidance for even more precise travel routes. And then number 2, landing in any specific space would be more precise. And we're seeing that happening all over us. So technology will be self-supporting, aircrafts will be autonomous, and basically machines will be more prevalent. We are most likely not going to be working long hours, to a large extent be enjoying the benefits of machineries and sending machineries instructions to say, do this for me, do this at a specific time. You probably wouldn't feel the need to go and switch on your heater or your aircon. You'll probably be pressing some button, whether that is on your tablet or on a cell phone or on a laptop. You will be sending a whole lot of instructions to machines. So storage is going to be required, obviously, for that, because you need to identify the behavioral patterns of the machines. And they also, to understand you, they have to do systems analytics on you as well. So the process of analyzing an individual is probably going to be a two-way scenario where, for example, your house will know that Dan will be at home between these particular times. And for that matter, your house will probably know that you are traveling about 5 kilometers from home. And then based on a set of instructions, it might tell you that, well, switch on the temperature to about 24 degrees because that's Dan's comfort level. By the time you arrive home, the environment is perfectly right for you. And when you're away from home for a weekend, the house will know that switch off this, switch off that, and therefore just run purely the basics to ensure that the households continues. So yes, that's the world that I see going forward.